The sun bled out across the New Mexico sky, painting the dust and ash in shades of blood. Zara Dawson stood in the graveyard of her own life. The air smelled of smoke and sorrow. Just last night, this was her home. Now it was a charcoal skeleton against the horizon. Her parents were gone. Her faith was a ghost. At just 22 years old, in the brutal heart of 1875, she was completely and utterly alone. She knelt by the two rough crosses she'd hammered into the dirt herself. Her fingers, stained with soot, trembled as she opened her mother's Bible. The pages were warped from the heat. She tried to read her mother's favorite psalm. Lord, hear my... The words caught in her throat. Dust, ash, grief. They choked her better than any noose. She tried again, her voice a raw whisper. Lord, hear my prayer. But the prayer wouldn't come. It was like trying to draw water from a dry well. A deep voice cut through the silence from behind her. Most folks find it hard to talk to him when they need him most. Zara spun around, the Bible nearly slipping from her hands. A man sat on a dappled gray horse, a dark silhouette against the dying sun. He swung himself out of the saddle, his boots making no sound on the scorched earth. He wore a long, dust-covered coat, and a weathered hat was pulled low over his eyes. As he got closer, a glint of silver caught the last rays of light. A star-shaped badge on his chest. Marshal Ethan Porter, he said, his voice as rough and steady as the land itself. He took off his hat, a simple gesture of respect. I heard about the fire, came as soon as I could. His eyes, the color of a gathering storm, moved from the smoking ruins to the two fresh graves. A muscle in his jaw jumped. I am truly sorry for your loss, Miss Dawson. Zara's whole body shook. She tried to speak the prayer again, but only silence came out. The marshal stepped forward and knelt beside her in the dirt. He gently took her trembling hands in his. His palms were calloused and warm. I'll answer beside you, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Sometimes God needs human voices to do his talking. And together they spoke the words. His steady baritone was an anchor, guiding her broken whisper through the ancient psalm. When they finished, a strange feeling settled over her. It wasn't peace, not even close, but it was the first flicker of strength she'd felt since the world had burned down around her. He helped her to her feet. The Rogers family in town, they've offered you a place to stay. I can take you there now if you're ready. Zara looked back at the blackened timbers. What about the land? It's all I have left. It's yours by right, he assured her. No one's going to take it from you. But there was something in his eyes, a shadow that told her he wasn't telling her everything. A story lay behind the story. You're holding something back, she said, her voice finding a sliver of its old firmness. Marshal Porter let out a slow breath, putting his hat back on. There are whispers, Miss Dawson. Rumors that that it wasn't an accident. The ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. The railroad, he continued, his voice low. They've been buying up land all through this territory, and some folks who refuse to sell, they've had what you might call misfortune. The world spun. You think the railroad murdered my parents? I don't know yet, the marshal said, his honesty as sharp as a blade. But I promise you this, I aim to find out. He helped her onto her family's last surviving mare, and they rode toward the distant lights of Silver Creek. The town was a tiny island in a vast, dark sea of prairie grass. Zara studied the lawman's profile. He wasn't much older than 30, but his face was carved with the lines of a man who had seen too much. Your father was one of the first men to welcome me to this town, Ethan said, breaking the silence. He said a town needs the law to grow proper. He believed in justice. Tears welled in Zara's eyes again. He did, above all else. He was a good man, Porter agreed, his gaze fixed on the trail ahead. And that's why I won't rest. He paused, then said something that sent a chill down her spine. And that's why this isn't just business for me. It's personal. Zara didn't know what he meant by that. Not yet. Mrs. Rogers, the wife of the general store owner, welcomed Zara with a hug that felt like it could piece a broken person back together. She was shown to a small, clean room above the store. Left alone, the grief she'd been holding back finally broke free, a silent, racking storm of tears. Later, there was a soft knock. It was Marshal Porter holding a tray with a steaming bowl of stew. "Mrs. Rogers thought you might not feel up to coming downstairs," he said. She took the tray, her hunger a sudden surprise. "Will you stay a moment?" He nodded, taking the room's only chair as she sat on the bed. He explained the legalities, how she needed to go to the bank to have the deed transferred to her name. "It should be simple," he said. "You're the only heir." "Unless the railroad makes it complicated," she said, the words tasting like ash. "I've already sent telegrams to the territorial judge," Ethan told her. "But Zara, the railroad has powerful friends. Out here, their money sometimes speaks with guns." Her appetite vanished. "Are you telling me I should sell, after what they did?" "No," he said, his voice firm. "I'm telling you what we're up against. Your father valued truth over comfort. I figured you might be the same." She met his gaze. "I am, and I won't be bullied off my land." A faint smile touched his lips. "I had a feeling you'd say that." He stood to leave. "Try to get some rest. We have a long road ahead." The next morning, Mr. Rogers escorted her to the bank. The banker, a thin man named Winters, offered his condolences while sliding paperwork across his desk. "I should inform you, Miss Dawson," he said, polishing his spectacles, "that there is still an outstanding and very generous offer for your property from the Western Railway Company." "My parents already rejected that offer," Zara said, her voice cold. "And so do I." "Perhaps," Winters purred, "in light of your tragic circumstances, you might reconsider. A fresh start. Are you suggesting I profit from the murder of my parents, Mr. Winters?" The banker went pale. "Certainly not. I merely—" "You merely what?" The marshal's voice filled the doorway. He'd been listening. Winters stammered, but Ethan ignored him. "Miss Dawson, there's a message for you at the telegraph office." Outside, Zara breathed in the clean air. "Thank you for that. I was about to say something very unladylike." Ethan chuckled. "I'd have paid to hear it. Winters has been in the railroad's pocket for years." But the news at the telegraph office was bad. The judge's investigator couldn't make it for at least 2 weeks. They were on their own. "I want to help," Zara insisted. "This is my family, my fight." Ethan studied her, his storm-colored eyes weighing her resolve. "It could be dangerous." "I'm already in danger," she shot back. "At least this way I'm not just a victim." He gave a slow nod. "All right. We'll start by going back to your land. We'll look for anything we might have missed in the dark." They rode out under the warm afternoon sun. Returning to the homestead was like a physical blow, but this time anger sharpened her grief. They sifted through the rubble, piece by piece. Ethan showed her what to look for, anything that didn't belong. An hour later, Zara's fingers closed around something hard and cool in the ash. "This isn't ours," she said, holding up a scorched metal flask. Ethan took it. On one side, engraved in elegant script, were 2 initials. J.M. The marshal went still. He stared at the flask, and all the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Ethan, what is it?" Zara asked. He turned the flask over and over in his hand, his expression unreadable, and for a moment she thought he was going to lie. "James Mercer," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "He's hired muscle for the railroad." "So you think he's the one who set the fire?" she pressed, her heart starting to pound. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at those two initials, a strange and terrible conflict playing out across his face. He finally looked at her, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "It's more complicated than that, Zara," he said, his voice heavy. "James Mercer. He's my brother." The world tilted on its axis. The man who had prayed with her, the man who had promised her justice, was the brother of the man who had likely murdered her parents. Every ounce of trust she'd placed in him curdled into suspicion. "Your brother," she repeated, the words feeling alien in her mouth. "My estranged brother," he clarified, his jaw tight. "We haven't spoken in 10 years. He chose his path, and I chose mine." He pocketed the flask, his movements stiff. "This changes things, but it doesn't change my promise to you." How could it not? They rode back to town in a thick, suffocating silence. Every shadow on the trail looked like a threat. Every word the marshal had said now seemed like a potential lie. Was he protecting her, or was he protecting his family? Back in town, they discussed their next move, the air between them charged with unspoken questions. "Mercer drinks at the Silverton Saloon," Ethan said, his voice strained. "But if I question him directly, he'll spook. Whoever gave him his orders will vanish." "So we need to find out who's pulling the strings," Zara reasoned, trying to push her doubts aside and focus on the facts. "The railroad has an office here, right?" "They do," Ethan confirmed. "The regional director, a man named William Crawford, is due for a visit next week." A plan began to form in Zara's mind, a desperate, risky idea. They must keep records, contracts, agreements, maybe even a list of reluctant landowners. Breaking into a railroad office is a federal crime, Zara. "I wasn't thinking of breaking in," she said, her mind racing. "They must have clerks, and those clerks have to buy supplies somewhere like the general store I'm currently staying in." A flicker of something, maybe admiration, maybe concern, crossed Ethan's face. "You're playing with fire." "My life is already ash, Marshal. What more do I have to lose?" Over the next few days, Zara made herself a fixture in the Rogers store. She learned the rhythms of the town, the faces of the railroad men. She paid special attention to a young, nervous clerk named Timothy Jenkins, who came in every afternoon for tobacco. On Thursday, she was ready. She offered him a warm smile and struck up a conversation about his important work for the railroad. The young man, starved for attention, puffed up with pride. "Mr. Crawford himself, he's the director, says I have the neatest hand in the whole territory," Timothy boasted. "I'm sure it must be difficult," Zara said sympathetically, "dealing with all those landowners who don't want to sell." Timothy's eyes darted around the empty store. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, there's a special file for the difficult cases. Mr. Crawford calls it his persuasive negotiations file." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. How fascinating. You must be very trustworthy to handle such sensitive... Before she could finish, the store bell jingled. Marshal Porter walked in. Timothy Jenkins went white as a sheet. He grabbed his tobacco, mumbled a panicked goodbye, and practically ran out the door. "You scared him away," Zara said, her frustration boiling over. "He looked a little too comfortable," Ethan replied, a strange edge in his voice. "That was the point. He told me about a secret file, Ethan. A file for people who won't sell." Ethan's professional mask snapped back into place. "Did he now? That's the proof we need." "If we can get our hands on it," Zara countered. "I was about to suggest he give me a tour of the office when you came stomping in." "And what were you going to do then? Flutter your eyelashes and ask to see their secret criminal records?" he challenged. "Women are often underestimated, Marshal," she shot back. "It can be an advantage." His gaze softened for a moment. "Just be careful, Zara. These are not good men. My brother." He trailed off, the word hanging in the air between them like a ghost. "They will not hesitate." Then, just as the tension reached its peak, Zara noticed something. A small folded piece of paper on the floor where Timothy Jenkins had been standing. He must have dropped it when he fled. She picked it up. Her name was written on the outside. Her hands shaking, she unfolded it. There were only a few words scrawled in a panicked hand. "They're watching you. He's one of them. Don't trust the marshal." The floor dropped out from under her. She looked up at Ethan, at the star on his chest, at the storm in his eyes, at the face of the man who said his brother was a monster. And for the first time she was truly terrified. The note felt like a hot coal in her hand. She stared at Ethan, trying to see past the badge, past the kind words, trying to see the truth. Was he a lawman seeking justice, or a brother covering his kin's murderous tracks? "What is it?" he asked, seeing the look on her face. She couldn't speak. She just held out the crumpled piece of paper. He took it, his brow furrowed. He read the words, and his face went hard as granite. He looked up, and his eyes met hers. There was no deception in them, only a deep, weary pain. "He thinks I'm dirty," Ethan said, his voice flat. "A lot of people do. It's part of the cover." "Cover," Zara whispered, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He reached into an inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He didn't show her the town marshal badge. He showed her another one. It was heavier, more ornate. A federal marshal's badge. "I'm not just the law in Silver Creek, Zara. I'm here for the United States government. I've been working this case for 6 months, trying to get close to Crawford. My brother, James, he's my way in. No one knows who I really am, not even the local law." The revelation was staggering. It reframed everything. His strange reactions, his personal stake, the clerk's warning. "So, Timothy was trying to warn me because he thinks you're a part of it." "Exactly," Ethan said. "Crawford must have me playing the part of a corrupted lawman on his payroll. It makes me invisible. It also puts you in terrible danger if you're seen with me." He looked at the note again. "But this kid, Jenkins, he just handed us our key." "The file," Zara breathed. "The file," he confirmed. "Now more than ever, we have to get it. It's the only thing that can bring down Crawford's entire operation and prove I'm not who he thinks I am." The new plan was desperate, forged in the shadow of this new, terrifying truth. They would hit the railway office on Saturday when only a skeleton crew was working. Ethan would create a distraction out front, and Zara would slip in through the back. "You'll have 10 minutes," he told her as they stood in the dusty alley behind the building. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows. "No more. If you don't find it, you get out. I can't hold them for long." She nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Her father had taught her how to pick simple locks, a skill she'd thought she would never need. He put his hand on her shoulder. "Zara, listen to me. If something goes wrong, if I don't make it out, get this to the federal office in Santa Fe." He pressed a small, sealed envelope into her hand. "It's my full report. It will be enough. Don't let them get away with this." "Be careful, Ethan," she whispered. He gave her a grim smile. "Always am." He walked around to the front of the building. Zara counted to 30, her heart hammering a frantic beat against her ribs, then tried the back door. It was unlocked. She slipped inside a narrow, dark corridor. From the front room she could hear Ethan's voice, loud and authoritative, questioning a clerk about a fictional robbery. She moved silently down the hall, checking the names on the doors. The last one on the right read, "William Crawford, Regional Director." The handle was locked. Taking a deep breath, she pulled a hairpin from her hair, just like her father had shown her. The metal scraped against the lock. For a tense, agonizing minute, nothing happened. Then a soft, satisfying click. She was in. The office was a different world. Thick carpets, leather chairs, a desk as big as a carriage. She went straight to the filing cabinets, drawer after drawer of boring contracts. Time was ticking away. Then she saw it. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind a stack of maps, was a handsome leather portfolio. The label was simple, chilling. Special acquisitions. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents detailing every farm the railroad wanted, and next to many of the names were handwritten notes. Henderson property, barn burned, offer accepted, Sanchez property, cattle stampede, offer accepted. And then she saw her own family's name, Dawson property. The note next to it made her blood run cold. Final resistance. Requires additional persuasion. Mercer and Associates authorized to proceed. WC. And below that, one more line. A line that made no sense. Informant Rogers confirms target is isolated. Proceed. Rogers. The kind man who had taken her in. The woman who had held her while she cried. They weren't neighbors. They were spies. Her sanctuary had been a cage. She tore her family's page from the portfolio, folded it, and shoved it into her dress. She was just closing the drawer when she heard them. Footsteps, coming down the hall. Her heart leaped into her throat. There was nowhere to hide, no closet, the window was too small. With only a second to spare, she dove under the massive oak desk, pulling her skirts in tight, praying they wouldn't see her. The office door swung open. "I assure you, Marshal, there's nothing irregular about our operations," said a smooth, cultured voice she didn't recognize. "Just doing my job, Mr. Crawford," Ethan replied. His voice was calm, but Zara could hear the tension underneath. Crawford. He was back a week early. They were trapped. Zara held her breath, crammed into the knee-hole of the desk. She could see two pairs of boots, Ethan's worn, dusty leather, and Crawford's polished city shoes. "Your sudden concern for railway security is curious, Marshal," Crawford said, his voice dripping with suspicion. "It coincides remarkably with the unfortunate Dawson situation." "A tragic accident," Ethan said, his tone carefully neutral. "Accidents happen," Crawford chuckled, a sound with no humor in it. "Especially out here. Oil lamps tip over, unless, of course, someone gives them a little help." His voice hardened. "But that would be a serious accusation, one that would require proof. Proof, I am confident, that does not exist." There was a long, tense silence. "Well, we'll see about that," Ethan finally said. "Good day, Mr. Crawford." "A word of advice, Marshal," Crawford called after him. "The railroad brings progress. Those who stand in its way, lawmen and farmers alike, tend to get run over." The door closed. Ethan was gone, but Crawford didn't leave. To Zara's absolute horror, he walked over to the desk and pulled out the chair. His legs were inches from her face. She could smell his expensive, cloying cologne. He sat down, humming to himself, shuffling papers. Then he stopped. He stood up abruptly and walked to the filing cabinet. Zara heard the slide of the metal drawer opening, the same drawer she had just closed. A long, dangerous silence. "Interesting," Crawford murmured to himself. He strode to the door and flung it open. "Jenkins," he barked. The young clerk scurried in. Yes, Mr. Crawford." "Has anyone been in my office? Has anyone accessed this cabinet?" "No, sir. It's kept locked, just as you instructed." "Then why?" Crawford asked, his voice a low, deadly hiss. "Does the Special Acquisitions folder feel lighter than it did this morning?" Zara's heart stopped. Jenkins stammered, terrified. I don't know, sir. Maybe you." "Maybe," Crawford said slowly. He dismissed the clerk, but Zara knew it was over. He knew. He came back to the desk, sitting so close she could feel the heat from his body. Time stretched into an eternity. Every breath was a risk. Every tick of the clock on the wall was a hammer blow. Just when she thought she would break from the tension, there was a knock on the door. "Telegram from Denver, Mr. Crawford. Marked urgent." With an annoyed sigh, Crawford stood and left the office, closing the door behind him. It was her only chance. She scrambled out from under the desk, not daring to go for the door. She ran to the window. It was small, tight, but she didn't care. She threw her weight against it, forcing the latch. It groaned, then popped open. She squeezed through, scraping her arms, and dropped 6 feet into the alley below. She didn't look back. She just ran, her lungs burning, the stolen paper a brand against her skin. She ran until she reached the old church at the edge of town, collapsing into the shadows of its steeple, gasping for air. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was Ethan. "That was too close," he breathed. "Crawford, showing up." "I got it," she interrupted, pulling the folded paper from her dress. "It's all here. Authorization. Mercer's name. It's signed by Crawford." He took the paper, his eyes scanning the words in the fading light. His face was a mask of grim satisfaction. "This is it. This is enough to hang them all." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "You could have been killed." "I wasn't," she said, her voice still shaky. "But Ethan, there was something else." She took a deep breath. "A name, an informant. It was Mr. Rogers." The last bit of warmth left Ethan's face. "The man who took you in. The man who's been reporting my every move to Crawford." Her sanctuary, her safe house, was the center of the spider's web. "We can't go back there," Ethan said, his mind already working. "Crawford knows the paper is missing. He'll tear this town apart looking for it. He'll start with you, and then he'll come for me." Before Zara could ask where they could possibly go, the church door creaked open. Reverend Thomas stood there, a lantern held high. "Marshall? Miss Dawson?" he said, his face etched with concern. "Is everything all right? You both look like you've seen the devil himself." Ethan hesitated for only a second, then made a decision. "Reverend, we need your help, and we need your silence. The devil is indeed in Silver Creek tonight." Inside the quiet sanctuary, surrounded by candlelight, they told him everything. The fire, the file, Mercer, Crawford. They even told him about the betrayal of the Rogers family. The Reverend, a man with a kind face but eyes as hard as steel, listened without saying a word. When they were finished, he nodded slowly. "The mission house out back," he said. "No one but me and the Lord knows it's there. You'll be safe, at least for a time." "Thank you, Reverend," Zara said, a wave of relief washing over her. "But what about the evidence?" the Reverend asked. "A piece of paper can be burned as easily as a farmhouse." "He's right," Ethan said. "Crawford will be looking for this document, but he'll be looking for it in town." He looked at Zara. "The territorial judge is too slow. The only one who can move fast enough is the federal marshal in Santa Fe. It's a 3-day ride." "You're leaving?" The thought sent a fresh jolt of fear through her. "It's the only way," he insisted. "Crawford will be watching both of us. He'll have men on every road out of town. But he won't expect the evidence to leave with me. He'll assume you have it. As long as you stay hidden, his attention will be focused here. I'll ride hard, and I'll come back with enough firepower to level his entire operation." The logic was sound, but the fear was real. That evening, as Zara settled into the Spartan mission house, Ethan arrived with his saddlebags. He was ready to ride. "I've made a copy of the document," he told her, his voice low in the darkness. "I'll carry this one, but you should keep the original. It's the one that matters." "Where can I hide it?" she asked, looking around the small, bare room. He reached up and removed a small leather pouch from around his neck. From it, He pulled a silver locket tarnished with age. He opened it. Inside, where a tiny portrait should be, was a hidden compartment. "My mother's," he said quietly. "She used it to hide emergency money during the war. It's the safest place I know." Their fingers brushed as they folded the precious document into a tiny square and sealed it inside the locket. He placed the cool metal chain around her neck. It felt impossibly heavy. "I'll be back as fast as I can," he promised. "Be careful, Ethan. His men will be watching." "I know a few trails they don't," he said. He reached out and gently touched her cheek. "Stay safe, Zara Dawson." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. The next 3 days were the longest of Zara's life. She stayed hidden, a prisoner in the tiny mission house, the locket a cold weight against her skin. The Reverend would bring her food and news. Crawford's men were everywhere, angry and desperate. They'd ransacked the Rogers store, pretending to look for stolen goods. They were turning the town inside out. On the third night, she was jolted awake by a sound that made her blood run cold. Shouting, and the splintering of wood. It was coming from the church. She ran to the small, grimy window and peered out. The church was surrounded, a dozen men with lanterns and rifles, and at their head, his tall frame unmistakable in the moonlight, was William Crawford. "He must be in there!" Crawford roared. "The Reverend is hiding him! Tear the place apart!" Zara's mind raced. They were after Ethan. But Ethan was on his way to Santa Fe. Unless he wasn't. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the church steeple. One of Crawford's men crumpled to the ground. A second shot, and another man fell. Someone was fighting back. Crawford's men unleashed a volley of gunfire at the church. Then she heard a familiar voice cry out in pain from the direction of the church. It was the Reverend. Crawford's men stormed the building. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. They had the Reverend. They would make him talk. He was the only one who knew where she was. She had to run. She slipped out the back door of the mission house, plunging into the darkness behind the church. She kept to the shadows, her only thought to get away, to get to the livery stable and ride. As she crept along the cemetery wall, a hand shot out of the darkness and clamped over her mouth. She thrashed, a scream dying in her throat, until a familiar voice whispered urgently in her ear. "It's me." "Stay quiet." He released her. It was Ethan. Blood was streaming from a cut on his forehead, his clothes were torn, and his breathing was ragged. "You're back," she gasped. "They were waiting for you." "Crawford must have had lookouts on the Santa Fe Trail," he said, pulling her deeper into the shadows. "Spotted me coming back. I rode hard. The federal marshals are a day behind me, maybe less, but we don't have a day." "They have the Reverend," she told him, her voice shaking. Ethan's face darkened. "Then he'll talk. They'll be here any second. We have to move. Now. Where can we go? They have the whole town locked down." He grabbed her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Not the whole town." He led her through a maze of back alleys and shadowed yards she never knew existed. They moved like ghosts, the sounds of Crawford's men echoing all around them. He brought them to the livery stable where 2 horses were already saddled and waiting. "We ride for your family's land," he said as he helped her mount. "But that's the first place they'll look." "No," he said, a grim set to his jaw. "It's the last place they'll think we're crazy enough to go." They galloped out of town, leaving the lights and the shouting behind them, riding hard into the vast, dark wilderness of the New Mexico night. The moon was their only guide, but Ethan seemed to know every rock and every ravine. Just before dawn, they reached the ridge overlooking the charred remains of the Dawson farm. "Why here, Ethan? What can we do here?" Zara asked as they dismounted in a stand of cottonwood trees. He didn't answer. He just held up a hand, listening. And then Zara heard it too. It wasn't the sound of horses. It was the soft, almost imperceptible click of a rifle being cocked. They were not alone. From the shadows of the rocks and trees, figures began to emerge. 4 of them, then 6, then 10. Hard-faced men with rifles and federal badges gleaming in the pre-dawn light. They had been waiting for them. The lead man, a grizzled veteran with a thick mustache, stepped forward. He wasn't looking at Crawford's men. He was looking straight at Ethan. "Marshal Porter," the man said, his voice cold as a tombstone. "Or should I say, Mr. Mercer?" Zara's blood turned to ice. "We got a telegram from a Mr. William Crawford," the lead deputy continued, his rifle aimed steady at Ethan's chest. "Told us a rogue lawman named Porter, who was actually the brother of the murderer, James Mercer, was using a grieving girl to get his hands on some incriminating evidence he planned to destroy." Ethan stood perfectly still. He didn't reach for his gun. He just looked at the men surrounding them. "He told us," the deputy said, his finger tightening on the trigger, "to shoot you on sight." The world stopped. Ethan, the man she'd finally allowed herself to trust, was caught in a perfect trap. Crawford's lie was more powerful than their truth. They were surrounded by lawmen who thought they were the criminals. "My name is Ethan Porter," he said, his voice calm and even, though Zara could see the sweat beading on his temple. "I am a federal marshal. My badge and my report are in my saddlebag. The woman with me is Zara Dawson. Her parents were murdered by William Crawford and my brother, James Mercer. The evidence is in a locket around her neck." The lead deputy, whose name was Wills, didn't move a muscle. His eyes were hard, skeptical. "Crawford's telegram said you'd have a good story." From the direction of town, a new sound carried on the morning breeze. Hoofbeats, a lot of them. "Coming fast. That will be Crawford," Ethan said, his gaze never leaving Wills. "He thinks he's riding into his own trap. He thinks you're going to kill me for him. You have about 1 minute to decide which side of the law you're actually on." The hoofbeats grew louder, a thunderous drumming that seemed to shake the very ground. Wills looked from Ethan to the approaching dust cloud, his face a mask of conflict. "What if you're lying?" Wills demanded. "Then you can shoot me yourself," Ethan replied. "But if I'm telling the truth, and you let him get his hands on that girl, then you're condemning an innocent woman and letting a dozen murderers walk free. Your call, deputy." The riders burst over the ridge. It was Crawford, with James Mercer beside him, and at least 10 hired guns at their backs. They pulled up short, their faces a mixture of confusion and triumph when they saw the federal marshals. Crawford smiled, a predator's grin. "Excellent work, deputies. As you can see, the fugitive is right where I said he'd be. You can take him now." Deputy Wills looked at Crawford. He looked at the smug, cruel face of James Mercer. Then he looked back at Ethan, who hadn't flinched. And in that split second, the veteran lawman made his choice. "William Crawford," Wills bellowed, his voice ringing out across the clearing. "You and your men are under arrest for conspiracy, arson, and murder." Crawford's smile vanished, his face contorted with rage. "What? You fool! He's the criminal." "I'll take my chances," Wills growled. With a scream of fury, Crawford drew his pistol. The world exploded in a storm of gunpowder and chaos. The clearing became a slaughterhouse. Federal marshals and Crawford's men exchanged fire, the air thick with smoke and the screams of wounded men. Ethan shoved Zara behind a thick cottonwood tree, shielding her with his body as bullets ripped through the air around them. "Stay down!" he yelled, drawing his own pistol and returning fire. Zara peeked around the tree, her heart pounding. Men were falling on both sides. Crawford was using his horse as a shield, directing his men with cold, ruthless efficiency. Then she saw him. James Mercer, his face a snarl of hatred, was taking aim. not at the deputies. He was aiming directly at his own brother. Ethan was exposed, reloading, completely vulnerable. Without thinking, Zara grabbed a rifle from a fallen marshal. She'd hunted with her father. She knew how to shoot. She didn't aim to kill. She fired at the ground in front of Mercer's horse. The stallion reared in terror, screaming and throwing Mercer to the ground. The shot went wide. The distraction saved Ethan's life, but it drew the attention of the devil himself. Crawford saw his advantage disappearing. He saw Zara with the rifle. With a guttural roar, he spurred his horse directly at her. She tried to scramble away, but he was too fast. He leaned down from the saddle, his iron grip closing around her arm, and yanked her off her feet. The rifle clattered to the ground. "The locket, Miss Dawson," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "Give it to me now, or I'll finish what my men started." "Let her go, Crawford." Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. He was standing in the open, his pistol aimed squarely at the railroad man's head. The gunfight around them seemed to fade into the background. "Drop your weapon, Marshal," Crawford sneered, pulling Zara in front of him as a shield. "Or the girl dies first." Ethan's face was a mask of cold fury, but then a strange, confident smile touched his lips. "It's over, Crawford. You've lost." "I'm holding the girl," he shrieked. "I haven't lost anything." "Look around you," Ethan said calmly. Crawford's eyes darted around the clearing. Most of his men were dead or wounded. The surviving federal marshals had them surrounded. It was hopeless. A desperate, wild look entered Crawford's eyes. "If I'm going down, she's coming with me," he hissed, raising his pistol to Zara's head. But in that moment another figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was James Mercer. He was wounded, bleeding from his side, but he was standing, and his gun was pointed not at Ethan, but at William Crawford. "Let her go, boss," Mercer said, his voice raspy with pain. "It's done." Crawford stared at him, bewildered. "Mercer, what are you doing? Shoot him. Shoot your brother." "No," Mercer said, shaking his head. "We lost. There's no more money in this." This was Zara's chance. With Crawford distracted, she drove her elbow back with all her strength, catching him square in the ribs. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. She tore free, stumbling away from the horse. Two shots rang out at the exact same time, one from Ethan's gun, hitting Crawford in the shoulder and knocking him clean out of the saddle. The other was from James Mercer's gun. It struck Crawford directly in the heart. The railroad director was dead before he hit the ground. In the ringing silence that followed, James Mercer dropped his pistol and raised his hands. He looked at his brother, not with hatred, but with a look of profound, exhausted resignation. The fight was finally over. In the aftermath, as the federal marshals tended to the wounded and rounded up the few surviving prisoners, a strange and quiet scene played out. Ethan walked slowly over to his brother, who was now sitting on the ground, his back against a tree, hands cuffed in front of him. Zara watched from a distance. She couldn't hear what they were saying. The two brothers, separated by a decade of silence and a river of blood, spoke in low, quiet tones. There was no shouting, no anger. It looked like the closing of a book, the end of a long and terrible chapter. Finally, Ethan stood and walked back over to her. He sat down beside her on the charred foundation of what was once her front porch. The sun was climbing higher, bathing the land in a clean, golden light. "It's over," she said softly. "Yes," he said. "It is." He looked out over the property. "My brother told me. He told me why he did it, why he joined Crawford." Zara waited, saying nothing. "Years ago, before we moved here, our father was a farmer, just like yours. The railroad wanted his land, too. He refused to sell. One night, his barn caught fire. He died trying to save his horses." Ethan's voice was heavy with old grief. The law called it an accident. James, he never believed it. He became bitter. He figured if you couldn't beat them, you should join them. Get your share. I I went the other way. I decided to become the law they never had. It was a story of two brothers, broken by the same tragedy, who chose two different paths, one towards darkness, the other towards the light. What will happen to him? Zara asked quietly. He killed Crawford in front of a dozen federal agents. They might see it as him saving your life. He'll go to prison, but he won't hang. Maybe, someday, he'll find some peace. He fell silent for a long moment, then turned to her. Zara, what about you? What will you do now? She touched the locket, still hanging around her neck. I don't know. This land, it's all I have left of them. But it's filled with ghosts. You could rebuild, he said, his voice gentle. Make new memories. You don't have to do it alone. Her heart started to beat a little faster. What are you saying, Ethan? He took her hand. His was warm and strong. I'm saying that when I rode to Santa Fe, I thought I was riding for justice. And I was. But I was also riding for you. When this is all settled, my work here is done. I can be assigned anywhere. Or I could resign my commission. I could be a man who knows how to build a house and raise cattle and stand by a brave woman's side. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. Not tears of grief, but of a fragile, hesitant hope. I think, she whispered, her fingers tightening around his, I would like that very much. They sat there together on the ruins of the past as the morning sun promised a new day. The land was scarred, and so were they. But for the first time since the fire, Zara Dawson saw not an ending, but a beginning. Justice had been found. And maybe, just maybe, so had a future. If you were moved by Zara and Ethan's fight for justice, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more stories of survival and redemption. And let us know in the comments what you think is the most important part of rebuilding after a tragedy.